Hi, we're the Heart Collective based in Los Angeles, California, streaming through the universe, and I'm Taryn.
I'm Rhoda.
I'm Liz B. We are reframing definitions through heart-centered conversations. So by definition, forgiveness is to consciously and deliberately release feelings of resentment or vengeance toward people or group of people who you believe have hurt you. How do we feel about forgiving?
Very poignant, timely topic.
Aren't they all?
Yeah, true.
What I find interesting about forgiveness is it can be instant or it can take a really freaking long time, right?
Too long of a time.
Too long of a time, because you can keep working on it, like knowing that you should forgive someone just because it will set yourself free is one thing, but actually doing, like, really feeling completely free from that anger or resentment is another thing. I say that because the thing that happened to me was my father, he had some addiction issues, and so he was completely out of my life for a long time. And then I got a phone call from my sister saying that he was dying at a hospital. And so I flew to another country to be with him. And the moment that I saw him, it was like instant forgiveness. There was nothing else that needed to be done but just to love this person at the end of their life. And I think it's that removal from this, like a personal, like someone's personally attacking you. It's that separation, that kind of, when you create that space and just see someone for who they are and not the stories around what they've done or who they've been to you personally or to anyone else, and that you feel so justified to be angry about or be resentful about. It's just really interesting how it can just happen so instantly.
Why do you think that happened at that moment? What was different than before?
Yeah, I think it was that separation that occurred where I saw my father for his humanity, and I was not his daughter. He was a dying man, and I wanted to compassionately, going back to our last episode, compassionately be there for someone who needed someone, who was going to die by himself. And it was almost like I was called out of my own smallness to something greater.
Death teaches how to live, huh?
Absolutely.
I have so many things to say about the stories that we tell ourselves or hold on to. The mind keeps playing the loop. I think that if we look at our minds, most likely it's like saying the same things over and over again.
It's like a broken
Probably.
Yeah, right? It's like a little... I think that I think that's the interesting practice of meditation, is you start to notice like the loops. You're like, oh, here I am again. Oh, here I am again. Groundhog Day, right? Like, so when you said, I just saw him for a dying man, it's like the story's dissolved. Therefore, the space for forgiveness was instantly created because there were no shoulds and coulds or hads, or right? It was just present to present, or presence to presence, your presence with his presence. And how beautiful to be in that space if we could only allow for that. We've talked about it before, I think, on our podcast, about just being present, allowing ourselves to be anew, at every moment, and also allowing others, and to not treat them or relate to them based on the stories that we have of them or even of ourselves. So that really reminds me of that. Yeah.
It's true. I think it's such an interesting process. Like, forgiveness, I feel, can be equally for the person that we're forgiving, as a gift to them, and also a gift that we give ourselves. Because holding on to things, like past hurts that we've encountered, like everyone that's been on this planet over a certain age has been hurt, destroyed, offended. Some of it's been intentional, some of it's been unintentional, and we consistently, through actions, thoughts, words, even if we don't mean to, we harm others or ourselves. So I think forgiveness is a more common practice than maybe we give it credit for, but knowing that it's beneficial on both sides of the equation, I think too is an interesting part of the process.
I once was in an ayahuasca ceremony and was dealing with a situation in my life where I was having a really hard time forgiving. And that because the situation had gotten so heavy for me to carry by myself, I looked into alternatives of how I could deal with the situation, and then went to plant medicine. And I had this inner knowing that was so clear to me at a certain moment in that journey that literally, and I hadn't heard any of the quotes before about, holding each other in a certain manner, but what I felt was that by holding somebody to a certain idea of what they had to do or should have done, or et cetera, I was keeping them in a prison. But unless I was there to hold the lock, I had to be there to hold the lock for that person to be in that space. And so it was the inner realization and knowing that unless I removed myself and removed that person from that encapsulated idea, I'd had to be there with that person. So there was no freedom.
Right.
I was just holding myself hostage with the idea of could and should have done, or shouldn't and couldn't have done, etc. And so when I was able to realize that I was holding myself in the prison with that person, it became clearer to me that, again, like you've said, it was a process of self-forgiving. And I think that most of forgiveness is self-forgiving.
Absolutely. Self-forgiveness,
in the sense of like really allowing ourselves to feel and go through the processes, because I think I even think that forgiveness is a little associated with just the process of grief. One of the aspects of forgiveness is like the denial of like, this really happened.
Right.
How could this have happened, right? And then like just the anger that happened, and then just all those like stages of grief that some scholars talk about, and just really being able to just sit with your grief. Being able to feel the anger, the despair, the resentment, and all of that. The only way out to me is through. We keep coming back to the theme of.
So smart, yeah.
Right?
What, there is no other way. You're in a cage otherwise, and I think these are emotions that we really have to allow ourselves space to express, and the approving of it as an emotion that is acceptable to express. And I know that it's not. Like having rage is something that scares other people, and we can scare ourselves with that, but it's a very appropriate emotion, and part of the grieving process, as you said. So it's a liberation. I think you're liberating the other person and yourself from, as you said, that constraint, that cage, that locked-in cage of saying, you're this person, you did that, I allowed it, it's that. And I'm sure that's, for all of us, a magnificent feeling to just let that go. Let the story go.
I think that, let the story of yourself go, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not that person. Like, you lock yourself just as much as you lock the other person as this person, because that can only exist if you exist in that same momentum. So
Right.
once you realize, well, I'm not that person, that wouldn't happen anymore, probably won't happen. So where is the story? Like, where do we hold these fragments of our lives?
Yeah. Keeping ourselves in a trauma loop, right?
Right.
To where it's a continuous repetition of the like victim perpetrator blame, lack of forgiveness, and I feel from personal experience it's probably more damaging to the person that's needing to do some forgiving
Yeah.
eventually.
If you are in that victim mode, then there's no power.
Yeah.
So
You're giving.
you're giving. Yeah, I like that imagery that you said, Liz, of holding the prison door, because you're stuck there. And you're like, you can be outside of the cell, but you're literally standing there holding the door closed. And there's no power. You don't have that
You don't have
free
the freedom.
hand to do what you need to do.
Or to just get out of that construct,
Yes.
right? You're just as much as in that construct as you are holding the other
Right.
person. And it was such a visceral, like, understanding of forgiveness and the freedom from just like, oh, I get it. I get it. Doesn't mean, I'm always forgiving, or
Right.
like I've accomplished this, like
Yeah.
I plateaued in this, or reached this stage. But it was a good, beautiful realization that I can be reminded of like, oh, I see, there I am holding the door. You can go, but as much as I say you can leave, I can't leave either. I'm just right there with it.
Yeah.
So true.
In that place. And again, I'm going to quote Rumi, but I just remember this other quote that he said, do not reject grief and something else. Do not reject grief and loneliness, for those feelings can what is the word he used? It's so beautiful. Do not reject grief and loneliness. Let them, when you're marinating food, I forgot, I'll remember it, but it's just, in other words, saying, let those feelings of grief and loneliness, of despair, anger, just like infuse you, or oh my God, I forget the word, but basically, when you're marinating food and then you create something else from that, putting all those spices and letting it sit for a while, and then it's not the same as it was before. I want to say sharpen, but it's not that. But basically something along the lines of like, let them infuse you.
Right.
So you can, become from that and not be defined by that. So I'll see if I remember the quote precisely, but I don't right now.
I had posted on Instagram this beautiful quote. I don't know who it was by, but it was like, basically the essence of it was, your wounding is your gift. So if you're here in the world for to heal brokenheartedness, you are going to feel brokenhearted for most of your life. And at the end of it, I love the end of it said, your oil is rich, or something like that. And
Ooh, got the chills, yeah.
I just love that idea. This other woman had responded to that, and I was listening to her speak on it. She's this beautiful artist, and she drew this like kind of like it was almost like the sun dripping oil, and she talked about how essential oils, when you think about a plant, this plant has gone through all the things, the wind and the rain and animals nibbling on it. There's so much that happens to that plant, that life of a plant. And then you distill the oil out of it, and it's this richness that no one else has. Like, this particular lavender will never be like this lavender in another field.
true.
And there's like this richness that comes from that experience.
So true. It's so true, and I think it's unfortunate that we are collectively, I think, kind of have a fear of feeling when the feelings aren't pretty, and that inhibits depth and growth, because the deep stuff, the rich oil, the real essence of things coming from taking risks, forgiving when someone does something unforgivable, because it may just be for you to need to do that. Feeling things that are uncomfortable emotions, being lonely, being scared, being terrified, being angry, and really sitting with that. That's where real depth of experience and character comes from. And I don't think the one-dimensional life is working, and I don't think that's where evolution happens. So it's good to dive into those things. And forgiveness is scary. It requires owning up to perhaps a place in the process that hurt us so much.
Exactly.
Or letting it go, which can be scary too.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because then it opens up a whole
Yeah.
nother question of who are you going to be without this
Right.
resentment
Absolutely.
and anger?
Yeah. Who are you now?
Who are you now?
Especially if it solidifies patterns that we're used to, right? And then we just keep finding ourselves there, even though we think, "Oh, this is so uncomfortable," but it's the comfort of the knowing of
Right.
that situation, that pattern, that feeling. And yeah, totally.
Yeah, and that's always kind of looking over the edge at the abyss, where we don't know what it's going to look like when we jump into something that we haven't done before, a forgiveness, a new relationship, doing something that scares us, or a new way of relating to ourselves or the world. And without that, I think it's a very sad place. The world can become a very sad place, and I think that we're seeing that right now. I think the world collectively needs that same kind of forgiveness. And what would the world look like if we were able to, people that needed to have some apologies made, were given them, and people that needed to say, "I forgive you," could say that. And I think that would create a lot of healing that is very much needed, and it is my personal opinion that is why a lot of things go on in this world that cause pain.
Agreed.
What
Yeah.
a rich conversation.
It is so powerful to have, to say that too.
Yeah.
Right? I forgive you. What a powerful statement that can be.
Yes, in the liberation of
And-
others' fault and shame and
Yes,
guilt and
shame and
prosecution of
guilt.
self. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's so powerful. So big.
Yeah. So the practice even of forgiveness with what we're saying now could be also turned around, right? Where can you forgive? Where can you be forgiving? Where can you give forgiveness? Because oftentimes in that process we're looking for that apology.
Right.
And you may never get it.
You may never
So
get
right.
it, but where can you allow yourself to forgive, even if you never hear that apology, even if there's never amends that are making? Can you freely give your forgiveness and say, "I forgive this, I forgive you, I forgive the situation," even if you're not having personal contact with that person, but just as a ritual, instead of waiting? Where's your power in giving the situation the blessing of forgiveness?
So true. Because sometimes forgiveness, like closure, is an inside job. Maybe
Yeah.
the other party is no longer available or not open to that.
Right.
So
And sometimes it's beneficial for you not to have that
Sure.
openness. It's a you can forgive someone without having to have any other interaction.
Right? Because it may not
Absolutely.
be safe and yeah, true. Yeah.
that's so true. And then it becomes for you to be liberated.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. which is the inner medicine of that. Oftentimes we think that by forgiving somebody, we're freeing them, but we're really freeing ourselves.
Absolutely.
And so you can even take that as a selfish practice.
Yeah.
It's
I'm in this for
true.
myself.
Yeah.
It's so true.
And yeah, but and even with everything that's happening now, everybody is waiting or looking for reparation. There may never be the kind of reparation that people deserve.
Sadly
in an
not.
ideal situation. And how can we move on without the reparation, but with an open heart? I feel like that's one point of forgiveness. How can we continue to keep an open heart through the pain? Through, as you were saying, everybody has been disappointed or prosecuted or treated in a way that they were not deserving of for whatever reason. And how can we still, through the pain, open the heart and say, all right, let's try it again. Let's do it one more time with either the same situation or others that are going to keep being presented until we really are ready to move beyond that.
So true.
I'm very self-reflective today, I realize.
It's important because, I think like you both said, it may not be appropriate or safe or available for the other party to even be present. And I think that keeping ourselves closed off is not appropriate right now. And this is a time of really feeling and allowing ourselves to feel, and being available to pain or suffering that we've all encountered, and just allowing that to be.
How can we also hold each other in safe containers and places that we are allowed to rage and to vent and to scream and to just be completely upset without the need to fix it or tame it, right? It's such a wild energy, but we've been tamed. I want to speak for us women in this experience of life, how much we're tamed. And I think just as human beings in general, we've been domesticated. We've been put in these boxes called homes and things, in these grids of infinite tension and pressure. And how can we also create space for ourselves and others to have safe containers to rage, to feel extreme despair, anger, and through that come out of it. Just ride that wave and come out. I think men suffer a lot from not having those spaces, being that primal, like, hunter, that they've always traditionally been, and how much they've been domesticated into these tamed figures that should hold, certain essences or dominions, and that they've been completely unplugged, or at least like some of that plug has been cut and frayed, where there's a disconnect. So I extend my care and love for also our brothers that, don't have the container and space to freely move through their anger and resentment and rage and despair.
Absolutely.
At least as women, we sit in circles more often than men do, I believe, in general. At least we talk about it,
It's true. I think women have a place in society where we can be emotional beings. It's more acceptable. We may be written off as, problematic or neurotic or crazy, but it's still socially acceptable, where a lot of men do not have societally or in their social or familial dynamics do not have space to be broken or need things. Or to need, nurturing or caregiving, and I feel for them very much right now.
Yes.
But I think from the position of forgiveness, I think that if you look back historically, we can all pinpoint a million things that we as humans have done to each other that are atrocious, that we have done to other living beings, animals, the planet, plants, and those closest to us, other humans, sometimes our own family members and our own selves. I think, each of us is guilty of sometimes being very hard on ourselves. So it's interesting to unpack, I think, how forgiveness can look for ourselves too. Because sometimes I've found that's the hardest one.
Absolutely. That's my hardest one.
Oh, me too.
Yeah.
Going back to what you were saying about some of the atrocious things that we've done as humans to each other, I'd like to disclosure as a brown person that it's not race exclusive. Let's just make that clear, because all races throughout time have had moments where they were prosecuting other races, and they were prosecuted. So it's this game that we've been playing with each other based on the separation game of skin color, of social class, of religion, of beliefs, and not to discredit some of the focus lens that we have put on now a group of people that have been discriminalized tremendously. But I just wanted to remind ourselves that as humans having this experience, we've been pretty brutal to each other if we look back in history,
We've been very cruel, and history is a long, winding, twisted road,
Right.
and there are many instances of that brutality. And what you said is really beautiful, Liz. And I think forgiveness, in looking at this in the lens of forgiveness, I think that having that awareness of what you just said, that very few people are singled out. Of course, there are structures, hierarchical structures of oppression and victimization, and we're all aware of those, or we all should be aware of those at this stage in the game. But I think that forgiveness goes a long way. And maybe people that are being hurt right now or have been hurt aren't going to get forgiveness from certain people. And it's sad because I think that the world would be a much finer place for everyone to live if people got an apology. Maybe not an apology maybe an apology for what someone's ancestor did. Maybe it would feel good, maybe it wouldn't, but an apology is due in many instances, I think. And I think also knowing that some people are just not going to be capable of making that apology.
Yeah, or accepting.
An
apology. Yeah.
So how do we move forward from that? It's very complicated.
What I find interesting is a lot of people I find are triggered by apologies. Like, for example, I really love the Ho'onoponopono prayer. And sometimes I'll say it and people are not aware of it, or aware of what it means and the blessing around it. And so when they hear the words, they find themselves unable to say, I'm sorry, please forgive me. Those are really hard words for people. It's that ownership, it's almost like they don't want to take on any responsibility.
Right.
Or they don't want to hear someone else. I remember putting it up somewhere on Instagram, I said the prayer, and I said it for me, and they said, someone commented that I didn't need to apologize. And it was almost trying to take away that blessing because they couldn't sit with the fact that I had said the word, I'm sorry, or please forgive me. It was very hard for them to sit with that. And I find that people in general in Western society have trouble sitting with that.
It's interesting.
Yeah, that is very interesting. Let's be the carriers of that torch, and let's just apologize left and right when we can.
It doesn't cost you anything. You don't have to. It's not a right or wrong. It's not saying, oh, I was so wrong. It's saying, maybe I had no idea I was doing it and my intentions were 150% pure, but I still did something that hurt you, and it may be because that's all about you.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, I was someone who hurt you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me.
Yes.
It's not a right or wrong, and I think that it's so dangerous for us to be caught up in this right or wrong, or I was doing the right thing. Maybe you were, maybe you weren't. Maybe from someone else's perspective you weren't.
Right.
It's subjective. I'm sorry. There are a few firm truths which we've addressed or tried to address before, and outside of that, a lot of things are entirely subjective. So
Beautiful.
if you hurt someone, apologize, and it saves so much time.
Oh my goodness, and it frees you so much
Right?
quicker, right?
Right,
Just
right.
the condensation of that energy that starts to like form
Yeah.
in the space where we create between us and others, and then there's this density and heaviness, and it's heavier and heavier and
Yes.
heavier, to the point where when you look back at the story, sometimes you're like, what? Like you cannot even make sense of it anymore, but it's still there. You're like, why am I thinking about this, or why is this right to be on like your present time? But it's this like dimensional space that was created, and I think that is part of relationships. It is a third entity that is created.
Right.
There's you, there's me, and there's us.
Yes.
There's you, there's me, there's us. There's the three of us, there's
Yeah.
us, right? And that dynamic, and so we start consolidating that, and then I feel like the more we do that, the more we're repeating the story of who we were at that time. And
So
also
true.
the other person is also still, it's almost like a broken record that keeps going back to that space.
Right.
And there's no freeing of like, who are you now? I don't even know.
Yeah. Exactly.
Who am I now? You know? Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it also allows you to, and I think we mentioned this before, but take the power back from something maybe you couldn't save yourself from, and saying, I wasn't aware of what was going on at that time, but I was hurt. I forgive you, because that's in the past. I'm going to let that stay in the past. It's in the rearview mirror, and the future is out there. The present is here. And I think it's a difficult facet of the human experience, that so much of what we experience, as you were saying before, Liz, is like the broken record monkey mind, that meditation is constantly trying to address that loop. It's like, here we go again. You're going to talk about that again? But it's bringing ourselves into the present and say, I'm not there anymore. I'm here. This is the present person, human here. I can't change that, but I can change the way that I feel about it, and I can change the fact that I'm giving it, front center stage or not. And I do personally believe that giving the past center stage constantly is a trauma loop.
Yeah, it's going to recreate
Yes.
more of the past.
Trauma loop.
Yeah.
And wouldn't that be because we're not allowing ourselves to feel everything that we have to feel when things do happen?
Yes.
And we stunt our growth, again, going back to the idea of stunting our growth by not being able to feel it. Therefore, the loop is just asking us to be with it. Otherwise, it just keeps coming back like, hello,
Yeah.
hello,
Me again.
hello. And by the
Ready
time
for
you just
more?
pull it and sit it down and be
Yeah.
like, what's up?
Yeah.
Right? And then there's like almost like you're shining so much presence and presence with it that it can't help but just soften.
Right. And see what it needs from you,
Exactly.
and just, the past isn't always over. I'm not suggesting that we let everything go, water under the bridge. Some things are far more complicated, painful, horrific, etc.
Yes.
But asking what the present you or me needs to address that situation, what it's asking of us, what it needs now, not what it needed from, 14-year-old Taryn or Taryn, 2 years ago. It's like, what does the present me need to get that resolution and forgiveness?
And maybe that's the forgiveness that one can give, is just to sit with it
Yeah.
and allow for whatever thing can come from it, not to ever get to a point where you can actually truly say, I forgive you.
Mm-hmm.
But you can give it the attention it needs for as long as it needs, until it
Sure.
may just not need that much attention anymore, and then you feel just a little more relieved, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think that's the first step to any alchemy, right? That we do transmutation-wise, is to lean into things, lean into those uncomfortable spaces, and then from there, it unravels.
The path is almost like shown, right? As each step that you take
Yeah.
towards
Sure.
it, you see a little more
Right.
of like, you have a little bit more clarity, you have a little bit more understanding or softening of that. So yeah, let us be people who, allow for each other to feel. My God, how much of our
Yeah.
conversations, right, are around just being able to feel. How many times have you heard a mother or father, an aunt or an uncle say, well, don't cry, it didn't hurt that bad. Why are you crying? Or why are you come on, just get up. Like, we're not even
Don't be angry.
Don't be
Yeah.
angry. Oh, you don't need to cry. Even as adults, people are so uncomfortable with other people crying.
So uncomfortable.
Right.
And then they immediately, either they say, well, you don't need to cry, you don't need to be upset, or you hear people saying, I'm sorry, I'm crying.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm crying.
Yeah.
I'm so
Right.
sorry, I'm crying. Why are you sorry for what?
Yeah.
So
For
true.
feeling?
For being
or
a
like
human
being a
being.
human? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're actually being present with what's happening in
Right.
your body. And that's
Yeah.
such a good guiding system. It's such a good compass, right? For the next step. It's just the right action of every moment of just knowing, like, oh, from here, I don't know where I'm going, but then you're really present. Well, that doesn't feel so good right now. Then I need to go that way. Or
Yeah, and allowing yourself the permission to have those feelings, and maybe not ushering each other off to a bathroom if someone needs to have a cry. Just letting them be, not shaming them or ourselves.
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Even when I started doing breathwork training, even in circles, we wouldn't have the tissue. We wouldn't offer tissues to each other, because it was almost like, I'm so uncomfortable with you crying, so I'm going to give you something to erase that.
Oh, wow.
So it was just like, it's there if you need it, but I'm not going to offer it to you.
That's such an interesting perspective. Every time I've offered a tissue, because I'm so easy to cry and I have no shame in crying, it's like, I see you crying here, like I'm here for you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was so thank you for offering me that, because it can be seen as like, oh yeah, like I need to like
Right.
pat my face and
Yeah.
like make this go away.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that perspective, because I've never thought about it that way. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Like, get yourself together.
Yeah,
girl.
you've had enough.
You're looking like a mess.
I don't have to deal with you. Go to the bathroom.
Your mascara's running.
Yeah, totally. And that's for women, and children. For men, it's far more inexcusable.
Yeah.
Oh, again, we go and we
Apologize
reach
for
and
you.
we
Man
Yeah.
up. And
Yeah.
hold our brothers in
Right.
that, oh my God, that tenderness of just being able to feel sad and cry.
Yeah.
And how much sometimes they haven't really experienced that much crying. They don't know how to cry. I want to cry, but I can't cry.
And what a release that is, right? So
Body's
important.
innate wisdom to just know how to either, like the same thing when you think of like yawning, right? Like it's your body innate wisdom to know, like to do something to relieve that pressure of that whatever you're feeling. Same with laughter, same with crying. And why do we suppress that? Why is it so uncomfortable to be around the feeling of distress or sadness? If we all feel it at a certain point.
Right.
Right.
Which is
We
so
all know what
interesting.
it feels like.
So then it makes me think of, where was it that we created, in what moment or moments that we slowly created that we weren't allowed to feel. It was shameful to feel. It was not accepted to be in this place of vulnerability. Oh, another great word. What is it to be vulnerable
Right.
in order to just even allow the concept of forgiveness? Vulnerable enough to know that we all play parts, right? Again, going to the perpetrator, prosecutor, like we've also have hurt other people.
Of course.
We don't stand, like you were saying, like in this place where we can be singled out of, like, I've never caused any harm. And you even extended that to like the plant world, the animal kingdom, and all of that, right? So life is, I mean, if we just sit here and we're in this beautiful space, but if I guarantee that if we sat here long enough, we would see something eating another something, right? Or knocking something down. So it is part of our existence, all of this birth and death and rebirth and all of that. But how can we self-forgive to the point of extending that to other people and then realizing I hurt too. I hurt others. I've hurt others. I've created suffering in others. Either I wanted, like, consciously to be like, I'm going to inflict pain on you because I'm mad, or not.
It's true.
I'm just owning up to that and self-forgiving enough to where there's enough space to be like, yeah, we all create suffering in different levels.
We do. Intentional, a lot of it is so unintentional too. And I think that's one of the things we talk about in our teachings with the Heart Collective is that, to answer your question, Liz, I believe that a lot of this inability to allow ourselves and others to feel comes from our disconnect from nature and our bodies. Hello. Sorry. It comes from our disconnect from ourselves, like our own bodies and nature and our natural state of being. And so a lot of us are in this, not right now, we're in the beautiful hills of the Palisades in Southern California, but we live so much of our lives in human constructed artificial environments with air conditioning and artificial lighting and clothes that make us feel uncomfortable and shoes that keep our feet off the earth and environments that, I mean, right now where we're not allowed to touch other humans or really come in contact with others in the way that we did. And I think that we've just set ourselves up for failure with that. We need to allow ourselves and others to feel. And that doesn't mean that everyone has carte blanche to, run down the streets and burn everything down or, hurt your children or your animals or your neighbor. But it does mean that we're allowed to cry, we're allowed to laugh, we're allowed to be upset. And forgive ourselves for those emotions. And others too. It's so natural. And without that, I think we lead very sad, rigid lives that are very one-dimensional, not really feeling anything, because without feeling polar opposites of emotions, like how can you feel love if you can't feel, anger or hurt or rage?
What do you know what that feels like? Yeah. Beautifully stated. We've been circling back. We've been tamed and domesticated, and too much. That again, as you both have stated beautifully, like there's a disconnect with your innate, like cycles. And even living in California, we are somewhat disconnected from like seasons, right? It's a little bit of Groundhog Day, which is beautiful because you get to do things that a lot of places you don't. I mean, most of the year. But where is our winter? Like, how do we feel our winter inside of ourselves? And how do we feel our summer or our spring where everything just comes to life and it's colorful? Or the fall where things are falling apart and just, but really internalize without necessarily need the external situation. Because even where I come from, there's not a lot of seasons either, But how do we allow ourselves to be in contact with our own seasons so we let that guide our movement in the world, knowing that sometimes and we create safe communal spaces where we can express those seasons as well.
So important.
Because we do create a lot of communal spaces for the joy and the ease and the laughter and the playfulness, but not a lot of communal experiences, and I would even say initiations.
So true.
Right? As a society who has disconnected from that, but where are the initiations for us, our daughters, and ourselves into womanhood, into our moon cycles, right? Which one of us was really initiated in that? And just the idea, it took me almost 40 years to like, and I grew up with a mother who was very like, this is a beautiful process, it's natural, you know, like just be okay with that, but not ritualized it enough for me to even be curious about it enough to see myself as that moon who weans and gets full, you know. And our men haven't been, we have a lot of grown boys.
Yes. That are not allowed to be men.
That are not
Or that don't
allowed to-
step into
right,
being men.
Yeah, that we're not, I mean, that we don't have structures to really facilitate that evolutionary like step.
No.
And a lot of times it comes through a lot of hurt and pain because we didn't create those, right? And there's a commercial that I saw on YouTube the other day, and it's like, I love sex, but I hate my period. And I'm like,
Isn't that the worst?
I know. I was just like, oh, no.
So you hate your body.
No. Yeah. Like, wait, what? And that's the message we've been, you know.
Yeah.
I remember growing up and my friends taking birth control pills to not have their periods.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
I think we're all women, and I know now men too are getting pressure from this, but I think we're indoctrinated to dislike our bodies as women. And I feel badly because I see men getting that now too. There's more aesthetic pressure on men now, where it's mostly been on women. I know very much in the past decade or two, it's been, you know, a lot of that's been focused on men as well. And it's again, compartmentalizing ourselves. And taking away what's natural and good and normal, and making it something that's wrong and bad. I think humans have a lot of work to do right now.
Yep. Get your backpacks, get some water.
Yeah, totally.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Oh, boy.
I keep thinking of the word fullness, because it's not allowing that full breath of life as it is. The cycles that you were talking about, the full breathness of being a human, and the full breathness of emotions. And when it comes to forgiveness, it's when you're not allowing forgiveness, it's not allowing that cycle of death as well, and letting go, and the full breath of that situation. And when that is complete, when there's completion around pain and oppression and a wrong that's been done, when forgiveness happens, it's almost like that's allowed the full breath of its life, and then it's allowed energy for something else.
That's beautiful.
That is beautiful. And with that, shall we just wrap it and put a bow on it?
Perfect.
I do remember the Rumi quote kind of, but do not reject grief and loneliness, for those can flavor you like no other ingredients.
So true.
Yeah.
Something like that.
So
It
true.
makes more sense now. I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah. And those experiences that have pained us, that need forgiveness for ourselves for having gone through it, and to the people that have wronged us, that experience has flavored us.
So true.
Goes back to what you were saying that you posted about how rich the oil is, right? So that little, the oil is just
Refining
getting
your
richer
essence.
and
It
richer.
is.
And,
Yeah.
yeah. So we like offering ideas of practices, and I think you touched on one that maybe you could elaborate just a little bit before we close. The Ho'oponopono.
Oh yes, the Ho'oponopono.
Yeah, prayer for forgiveness.
It boils down to 4 statements, which is, I love you, because you're creating that connection with that person or that thing that you're wanting to ask for forgiveness for. And the second one is saying, I'm sorry. And by that, you're allowing vulnerability and you're allowing your guard down in order to connect. And asking for forgiveness is the third statement. Please forgive me. There's so much medicine in that, right? Just please
asking,
forgive
right?
me. I can cry thinking about it without having someone to like put it on or something. Yeah. And then the last one is thank you. Because even if you don't get that forgiveness, right, there is an exchange that's happening that you are giving yourself forgiveness. If that person is unwilling to give it to you, then you have to give it to yourself.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. And the gratitude for the situation that somehow, hopefully, propelled you further, right, in your journey of self-awareness. And we have. Do you want to read our quote for the day?
So we have a quote that we liked, that we thought was appropriate right now, and it's, forgiveness is setting a prisoner free. I'm paraphrasing. Forgiveness is setting a prisoner free and knowing that prisoner was, and finding out that prisoner was you.
Mic drop.
Yes. And I'm sorry, I don't know who to attribute that to. It's a gentleman. I saw a picture of him, but I don't remember his name. I think his last name is Smeel, but I think that's...
Mr. Smeel.
There we go. Thank you, Mr. Smeel.
Thank you, Mr. Smeel.
Please forgive us.
Yeah. Thank you.
We love
Thank you.
We're really grateful. And we are the Heart Collective. Thank you so much for joining us today in one more heart-centered conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We love you.
We love you.
Please forgive us.
Oh, so good.
We sure have a good time.
Sure we do.
The Heart Collective is an initiative based in Los Angeles, California, and working globally to foster self-actualization and earth peace via self-peace through our nonprofit offerings and workshops. You can find us online at heartcollective.org, on Instagram at heart.collective, and wherever you find your favorite podcasts.